Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of the Madeline Makes Bake Off series, and it is Dairy Week. In the show for Dairy Week, the bakers were tasked for the signature challenge to make a cultured dairy cake. For the technical challenge, they were tasked to make 12 maids of honor. And then for the showstopper challenge, they were tasked to make mishti, Indian milk dessert treats. They were really pretty. And that was a challenge that I thought about undertaking. However, it was ultimately an easy decision for me as to what I would bake this week. And that is the signature challenge, which is the cultured dairy cake. The reason I knew I wanted to make this cake is because we have a recipe in my family that we've been making for as long as I can remember, and it's a cultured dairy cake. So I knew that if I was on the show and the signature challenge is supposed to be a signature to the baker, that this is definitely what I would be excited to make, and I was. I came up with the task of having to kind of alter this recipe to fit a bake-off challenge. The recipe as it stands is just basically jazzing up a very basic boxed cake recipe. Basically, you buy a boxed cake and you add a bunch of other ingredients to make it really rich and decadent. But you know what I probably can't do? I probably can't walk onto Bake Off with boxed cake. That's certainly not gonna fly, and that certainly was not gonna fly for this either. So I have this recipe written down in my Here cookbook. This just has, get your devil's food cake, get your instant chocolate pudding. Oh yes, this has instant chocolate pudding in it. I'm gonna go ahead and make a mixture of that, and then we'll make the cake. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to start with is making the instant chocolate pudding mix. It's just a mixture of dried milk powder and basically chocolate and sugar. Do you see that? Oh my gosh. Well, it looks like a chocolate pudding mix. Okay, can I give this as a gift? Last year for Christmas, I made my friends some cranberry butter. So, it's not out of character for me. So I will be adapting this recipe to be gluten-free for myself, but obviously for someone who doesn't have that restriction, this would just be a normal cake recipe. I love this color. And it's actually kind of like Bake Off because they have like colorful mixers, don't they? Hopefully this is a good devil's food cake recipe that I found. But I'm only doing the dry ingredients because then I'm gonna follow the family recipe for the wet ingredients, which is where the magic really happens. The chocolate cake mix itself isn't anything super special. It's just flour and cocoa powder, sugar, baking soda, and all that good stuff. But where this dessert really shines is in the wet ingredients where we have our cultured dairy, which is in this recipe, it's sour cream. Cultured dairy can be sour cream, buttermilk, yogurt, anything that's fermented. Ugh. But in this recipe, it's sour cream. Seems like a lot of sugar, but it's a cake. So that's my cake mix done. There's my instant pudding mix. So now I'm going to go back to the family recipe and go from there. The thought did cross my mind to try to elevate this even more. In my original notes, I put that I'll add orange because I really love orange and chocolate. It's one of my favorite combinations. But I figured if I'm gonna do a signature challenge, I wanna make it as close to what I know and love as possible because that's what makes a signature. I think it's always exciting when the bakers have an opportunity to bake something that's close and personal for them. So I'm just kind of taking that opportunity. There will come another challenge where I'm able to display my love of chocolate and orange. Michael in this challenge had such a hard time. I think this was the episode where his cake just split in half. And he was like, oh, it's only ever worked one time. I'm like, why would you do something that's only worked one time? And he starts crying. He cries when he's upset and he's like, oh no, it's split. And I'm like, oh, Michael, please. I love Michael. He's, I think, one of my favorites of the season, if not my favorite. Plug it in first. Wow, that looks like a proper chocolate cake mix. I am pleased. You just never know how things are gonna turn out when you try to change it up. Oh, and I can actually eat this bake. If you remember from the last episode, I couldn't try my own bake because I just made regular bread, not gluten-free bread. So at least I can enjoy this one. Well, it smells exactly how I would imagine, like how it should. Oh, wow. That looks glorious. Last, but certainly not least, chocolate chips. I usually do chocolate chunks, but I couldn't find any. For years, we made this recipe with semi-sweet chocolate. And then one day, everything changed and we tried it with dark chocolate. It makes sense though. I think as kids, the dark chocolate would have been too much for us. I mean, this is a cake that we've had for every single one of my dad's birthdays for as long as I can remember. I think the dark chocolate probably would have been too much for us when we were younger. So I'm glad we discovered the change because it's really good. This is the best cake to have for breakfast. If anyone's ever read The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, I remember a chapter where they talk about how the boys have chocolate cake for breakfast. And I remember reading that and thinking of this cake because if I was gonna have chocolate cake for breakfast, like this is the exact cake. And we did, when we would have this as a leftover. My dad enjoyed it with his coffee in the morning. It's just funny how food can make such tangible memories. When it comes to chocolate, measurements go out the window. Yeah, that was definitely more than the recipe calls for, but who cares? Delicious. All right, those look pretty evenly distributed, I think. I'm honestly very tempted to add more, but I will not. I mean, how decadent does that look? Oh my gosh, looks so amazing. Okay, wow, this looks amazing. So now I'm gonna pop this in the oven. This is gonna bake for almost an hour. It's a really dense cake, but it bakes at 350, so it's kind of low and slow. For good luck, just gonna sprinkle some on the top because it's my cake. I can do what I want. In terms of decoration, I know in Bake Off spirit, I should do all these elaborate decorations, but I don't know, this cake I think just kind of stands on its own. I thought about, doing all this different stuff. Maybe I'll make a ganache. No, see, anytime I think of something I could put on top, to me, it's just overcomplicating what is a perfect cake. I think these things that have nostalgia, you're almost afraid to mess with, and I certainly feel that with this cake. So I know the judges would probably say, it's a bit plain. It's a bit plain. But I think there's beauty in simplicity. Wow, I thought those would melt in a little bit more, but I do like the polka dotted look, I will say. This is a bundt cake, so this will end up being the bottom. And I gotta say, from the outset, it looks almost the same. The only difference is, I think with the normal recipe, it cracks all along this way. Like all this smoothness is a little strange. So I'm gonna let it cool down, sink a little, then I'll turn it out and then we'll just dust it and then we'll eat it. So excited. Okay, so now for a classic Bake Off scene where the contestants try to flip out their bakes. So mine's not as stressful, but here we go. I can see why that's stressful though. You're leaving a lot up to gravity. Goodness. Look at that. Mine's not very flat on the bottom. Wow. See, why would you want to mess with that? All right, so let's give it a slice. I'm just gonna do a small piece, Ooh, looks good. With these type of cakes, it's hard to tell if it's underdone or if it's just chocolatey. It's the moment of truth. Is it like I remember? Wow, what a great texture. Look how pillowy and moist it is. Delicious. Oh, wow, that is amazing. It's pretty spot on to the one I grew up with. I love that this is gluten-free because oftentimes, not all the time, when you get gluten-free items, they don't hit that spot. And I've noticed that a lot since I've had to transition to this type of diet. It's like you crave this thing and it just falls a little bit short. This doesn't fall short at all. This is delicious. It is so chocolatey. It's dense with chocolate, yet it's fluffy in texture. It has that moisture that you want in a really decadent cake. I think that's what the sour cream adds to this. So I'm really pleased with the texture, like really pleased. Wow. You know what? I think this would even impress Paul Hollywood. I think it would. If I was on the show, I would just make this. They'd probably be like, it's a bit simple, but I don't care. Simple is good. They always talk about don't do style over substance. I think this is all substance and not a lot of style. But that's okay. Star Baker, it's me. I win. Competition isn't very fierce, but I crowned myself Star Baker this week. I really look forward to having this with a cup of tea in the morning. Like I said before, this is the best cake to have for breakfast, and it is such a treat because chocolate cake for breakfast is just the best. I think this was super successful. I love that I was able to bring a recipe that I grew up with to this challenge. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more in this series or on my channel in general, please subscribe. And next week is, I believe, 1920s week. Wow. I'm excited for this one. I have a great idea. 1920s week. What a strange. They always do some type of historical episode, and we ended up in the 20th century this time. So I look forward to seeing you then for 1920s week, and hope to see you there. Yes, Pelos, you can come too. This just fell off the hinge. Help. Stop. Cameraman, come help me. Our apartment is falling apart. Stop.